Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be having a look at another Operation Heat's devlog, and today we're going to be looking at the BF-110C6. This is going to be the fourth BF-110 that we have added to the game. We have the C7 currently, the F2 and the G2 all sat at rank 2 between the BRs of 3.0 and 3.7 when it comes to arcade, and then when you come to realistic it's the same range. So when we have a look at the C6, we know it's going to be rank 2, we know it's going to be premium, so it's probably going to be around that BR. If I was going to be courteous, I'd probably say it's going to be around 3.0, since it does have a few advantages over the C7, but also has some disadvantages. So let's talk about the C6. What is it? You know, where does it come from? And all of these things. So during the Battle of France, the Germans were trying to work out what to do with aircraft such as the Bf-110s and the Ju-87s. It wasn't that like the Ju-87 where it was kind of becoming surplus to requirement. Instead, the Bf-110, they were just trying to fit into many different roles, either the light bomber, dive bomber role, or heavy fighter or attacker role. They were trying to find different ways of fitting it so it could fill any combat role they required, and the C6 was supposed to be the Zestora role. It was actually, if we look at Warplanes of the Third Reich by William Green, he describes it and the C7 as the last C-series variants, which were the Bf-110 C6 Zestora, which was introduced by the EGR-210 during the Battle of Britain, in which the two 20mm MGFF cannons gave place to the single 30mm Rheinmetall Mk101, and the Bf-110 C7 fighter bomber, which powered by DB601N engines, had two ETC 500 racks beneath the fuselage, which enabled two 1,100-pound bombs. So you can see that after the relative success of the C4 and the other C-series of Bf-110s, they were trying to find different ways to put this into practice, you know, in stuff like the Battle of Britain. Mainly this machine, according to Gaijin's history, now I cannot find any reference anywhere that this was actually used in the Battle of France, but I know it was used in the Battle of Britain, and I know its desired role. Being as a Zestora, it was supposed to be a ground attack vehicle, and the main thing it did was go after stuff such as ships in the middle of the English Channel, and also, supposedly, but once again I can't verify this, go after tanks in the Battle of France. Now what you have to remember is the C-series of Bf-110s were phased out of production in 1941, so stuff like the C6 and C7, they didn't make a lot of them, especially in 1940. This was more of kind of let's see what works if we add different weaponry to it. And the Mk101, well, at the time it did okay at tank busting, but it had a few issues which meant that it wasn't as good as some of the stuff coming forward. The Mk101 was used on machines such as the HE-177, funny enough, but mainly on the HS-129. Now what is kind of weird is we have HS-129s in the game. We actually have a bunch of them. I believe we actually have 4 overall. We have the premium Romanian one, which isn't in the tree anymore. Then you've got 2 in the tree, and then of course you've got the Italian one, which is just a copy of the one which the copy of the one which is the premium one from the Germans. So overall there's 4 HS-129s, but none of them have this Mk101. Instead they have the later Mk103, which has the better tank busting capability. The Mk101 can be seen as the predecessor, or the whatever that word is, to the Mk103, where it has a lower fire rate, it had not as good efficiency as the Mk103. It would unfortunately not jam a lot, but it would more like just have malfunctions with it during flight, and also the clip size that it has was not great. So when it started out on the HS-129, it had a clip size of 10. that was it. And then that was increased to 30, and it seems like Gaijin have gone along with the 31 for the BF-110 that you see here, since it's going to hold 60 rounds for its 30mm. Now, the fire rate should be around 230 to 280 rounds per minute, which isn't great, compared to stuff like the MK103. So if you're looking for a tank busting gun, as long as this thing is lower BR enough, it should be alright, but if it decides that it's going to be 3.3 or 3.7, my feelings is there are just better options in the tech tree. What you've got to remember is, in order to add this 30mm, which has quite a low rate of fire and a decent velocity, but not the best, it should be able to pen the majority of stuff you face when it comes to ground forces. By adding this to the machine, you lose the 220mm. Now, a lot of people won't really mind that, especially since you're going to use it in a completely, aggressive role when it comes to the ground game. But the C7, which is at 3.0, has access to the 220mm and the 4792s, and that gives us this multi-role capability that the C6 is not going to have. The C6 is going to be an out-and-out ground attacker just because of the weight of the weight of the gun, which is going to be sat under the fuselage, and also it's going to have weaker engines. One of the big upgrades that they did for the C7 is they gave it DB601N engines, the 12-cylinder inlines. The C6 should have weaker engines, which is why when you look at these engines here, they look different to the ones that are available on this C6 model. So that is something that you're going to have to get to grips with too. So you should have a weaker powered machine, which is maybe not as heavy when it has full bomb load if we look at the C7, but it still should be heavy and a little bit less maneuverable, and definitely worse when it comes to the fighter game. It still has the 7.92s, it still has the tail gunner in tow, so it still should be able to defend itself a decent bit, and they talk about in this article where it should be able to outspeed its opponents. The BF-110 for me has never been a machine which can do that. Instead, it's been a machine which, at least the early one, I'm talking about the C7 here, it's been incredibly maneuverable because of its big elevator. You're able to swish around people, and when it comes to the G2 especially, now the G2 is still a monster in the game. I actually did a review on it, so if you want to check it out. And because of these massive engines, the DB605Bs with 1280 horsepower at max power, this thing can just motor around the sky. It has incredibly good climb rates. It has a bunch of different guns, so you can use this in as a Storer fashion, or you can use it in a bomber fashion, or you can use it in a just an out-and-out brawler fashion if you really feel like it. With this here, with the 230 MK108s and the 220 MG151s, it's an amazingly good plane at the fighter or heavy fighter role. I would actually say one of the best in the game for that, if we don't look at some of the higher up heavy fighters. At its tier, one of, if not the best heavy fighter when it comes down to it. The F2's a little bit lacking, but it's still really good. The C7 is more of the bomber role, and that's where I think the C6 is going to sit. I think it's going to sit around 3.0. I'll be surprised if it goes higher. It really depends on how they model the MK101, but with the MK101 being in game, just like the Orbital with its 60mm, it brings us some more options. So we could get a HS-129 with the MK101, or we could get a HE-177, which also used the MK101s. It actually used them in this little area here, where it had two next to each other in some tank busting ways. You can actually see it modeled here in history, and it just looks completely ridiculous, but it's definitely something which would be interesting to see in the game. And there was even some other versions of the HE-177. They really just went all out to try and make it work, and they added a 50mm instead to the front. So if you wanted as a Storer version of a 177, then it was made. Another comment I do want to make before we wrap this up is it's really nice seeing another BF-110 in game. There are tons of variants to marvel at in history. If you don't know about the BF-110 variants, I highly recommend The Warplanes of the Third Reich by William Green. He goes through every variant, every difference, all of the uses of them. It's absolutely absolutely amazing. The thing I'm going to say is it's nice that we're going to have 4 BF110 variants, but now when I think about kind of a competitor which kind of outshone the BF110 in real life, not the Beaufighter or the Whirlwind, but the Mosquito. The Mosquito, in my opinion, is in dire need of what I would class as either a remodel or a HD remake. It still has issues when it comes to its cockpit modeling, if you look above and then if you look below. And also, we don't have the true fighter versions of the Mozzie in game. Instead, what we have is this fighter bomber version and then an anti-ship version. They did make some really nice high altitude fighter variants and also some others such as the Mark IV, which would be lovely to see. Even just a Mosquito that would be able to carry the cookie would also be a lovely thing to see. So maybe in an event in the future, or maybe in an upcoming update, Mosquito will eventually be crowned a useful machine in game, where instead now what we're seeing is it just keeps getting lowered in BR when it comes to it. So yeah, we now have 4 BF110s, we have a ton of Japanese heavy fighters, and we know there's more coming in the works because of those leaks of the models. We have a bunch of heavy fighters for the Americans. Let's get it rolling for the Mozzie. You know, what's the thing? It's like justice for the Mozzie. Hashtag justice for the Mozzie. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Martinez, Moxie, Alobralo, Super Cacti, Grisvolk, E-Love Goat, and Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.